So natural law is sort of complex because it shifts left and right depending on who you're talking to and who believes it. But it does have a common thread that we're going to try to reveal through this video. So just stick with me as we get through these slides. So what I like about natural law theory is sometimes you're practicing it and you don't even realize it. One of the things I would say is one of the bullets to natural law is it's a natural law that humans have to breathe, and humans have no choice but to breathe. So we were talking previously in another video about Kantian ethics having a categorical imperative, meaning that it is what it is because it is what it is, and I cannot change it. Natural law has a few of those, and one of them is humans have no choice but to breathe or they die. So that's kind of like natural law. Natural law believes that there are certain things that will happen because they have to happen and there's no other way that they can happen. So that's kind of the basis for natural law. It's an umbrella term and there's multiple theories that are wrapped up in this. There's natural law of law, natural law of ethics, natural laws of philosophy. But basically the same thing applies to all these theories. Everybody possesses some type of innate value. An innate value means innateism, means you're born with it. You are not a blank slate. Something was given to you prior to you coming out of the womb, and it's built into the hardware of your body. So all beings possess this natural innateism that governs their life. It's like a blueprint that we have no say on of what happens. We just have to follow along for the ride because naturally I can't do anything about it. So as I sit here, simply put, there are some things that can only do what they were meant to do because they have no other choice. So this is what Aristotle and many other philosophers before him called telos. Telos is the end goal or the natural ultimate purpose of a being. So natural law will say that an acorn is to be an oak tree. It has no other choice. A baby will be an adult. A car is meant to be moved. A dog to bark. A knife to cut. A bird to chirp, a girl to not know where she wants to go eat. It's nothing that we can do about that. That is our inherent purpose. That's the ultimate reason for like everything. So now here's where it gets a little complex. Natural law really depends on who you're talking to because everybody starts from a different square. Now, I'm not saying that this is relativism. I'm just saying that when you're discussing natural law, it's really important to define terms on who you're talking about because belief systems are very, very strong. And it's so hard to convince someone that they're starting in a different box than they are. So, for example, an atheist, they have the inability to believe in a God. So their morals and their ethics are coming from a place within themselves that they are creating. They're the authority behind this belief. They are looking out into the world. They're analyzing circumstances and environments and outcomes and consequences, and they're forming their own moral code. So that's the box upon which they are standing. They are the authority to decide what is the best outcome to live their life. Now, on the other hand, a theist, they are very obedient to the laws of their master. So depending if they're in the Abrahamic faith or say perhaps they're not Abrahamic faith, they're within the Buddhist faith, or they're in the Hinduism faith, or they're in the paganism faith. It really depends on who the authority figure is because they are beholden to that authority figure and they are going to follow the precepts and the principles and the commandments of that line of thinking. And since they're such a strong believer in that, that's their telos. There's no way that they are going to think an authority resides outside of that. So then now you can see with natural law, with the theist, there is a purpose because their master has told them what it is. But for an atheist, that purpose is being self-defined. So when you're going through these ethical dilemmas, your first question always is, okay, what's my starting point? Where am I at? Because I can't tell you what your natural end is going to be unless I know where we're starting. Now, natural law does have some room to move a little bit, and they have a few principles that kind of run similarly through the atheist side and the theist side. One of them is the survival of the self. The self is created and it is maintained by the ownership of the person, despite what their starting is. And it's natural that they want to survive, they want to live, they want to thrive. So in all ethical dilemmas, they are really thinking, what is the best outcome in the situation where I will not be harmed? Because my survival instinct is so strong, it's hard for me to fight against that. And in that, where it says means to an end permissible, there are sometimes things that you have to do that aren't necessarily considered good, but again, the outcome is going to be good. So naturally, you are going to try to minimize the harm to yourself and by extension, people around you in your ethical thing, in your ethical dilemma. But ultimately, natural law will state that it's not the survival of the fittest. That's too harsh. You're just thinking survival of the self. Every thinking, breathing being wants to live. Nobody wants to be harmed. Even down to the smallest ant walking across your path. That ant seems so insignificant in our lives, and we just can't be bothered with it. We'd rather step on it than talk to it. But that ant in itself has purpose. It has thought. It has got its daily duties to do. It wants to eat. It wants to survive. It wants to build. So in that, it's equal with you on the terms of surviving and being a part of this big, giant natural ecosystem that has a purpose. So that goes to the purpose-driven kind of maxim for laws. The question might come up about abortion or homosexuality. And this is a really complex one to discuss because, again, it all depends on what square we're starting from. But both squares would be discussing the survival of life. So natural law states that every species wants to continue. There's no species that wants to become extinct. They want to keep going. There's something in them that drives them to fulfill the ends of their species. So for natural law, they would argue that it's irrational to have an abortion because despite the circumstances that might be involved, if your life is not threatened by the continuation of this pregnancy, it would be natural for you to continue it despite your emotions surrounding it. Of course, there's a lot of complex issues that come up about why someone would decide to have an abortion if their life wasn't at risk. And again, it would all come back to, well, naturally, would your life be threatened if this life continued? Would society be threatened if this life continued? Because at the end of the day, we want our species to survive. And am I harming the continuation of that by doing this act? And of course, that debate could change depending on how big our population is. But you see how abortion and homosexuality would fall in that. If we lived in a world where there was no reproduction of the species and our species died out, naturally, we would not want that type of behavior. But if you live in a global presence where you are oversaturated with your population, then natural law would be kind of shifting a little bit. So that's why I said sometimes natural law, it could be a little loose depending on the exact circumstances that we're talking about. So as you go into your ethical dilemmas, what you're asking are, what are all my circumstances? And what would be the multiple outcomes depending on the multiple paths this dilemma could take? And what would be the most natural for this dilemma to play out depending on what square we're starting on? And you just kind of want to go from there. So again, there's a lot of different perspectives on natural law, and sometimes some of these aren't universally accepted amongst natural law theorists. I have some links for you to discuss. As you can see, there's quite a few people who have their take on natural law. They're not always going to agree with each other. There's not one founder of this, so it's kind of varied. So my suggestion to my students, especially if this is new to you, is to review the ones that I've given you here and try to pull out the thesis of their topic and then try to synthesize what's common amongst them. What threads and patterns are cohesive with each other, and have that be your base for understanding natural law as you go into these dilemmas. And then as you're going in these dilemmas, in and out of them, you too are fine-tuning your understanding of what natural law is and how you could apply it specifically to each unique dilemma you're about to face.